I'm now in Olympic weightlifting and performance, but just performance has always been my passion and something that I've been super interested in. So that being said, I just wanted to go over a few key points because, like I said, I don't have a lot of time. So a few key points for strength training and cross training for runners. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was efficiency in your training program. So incorporating compound movements, right? A lot of people are still stuck on the old bodybuilding type mentality of like doing arms and bicep curls and things like that. Instead of doing more full body movements, especially when it comes to runners, the name of the game is time, right? So y'all don't have a lot of time because y'all are spending how much time running? Probably quite a bit. So you don't want to spend hours and hours and hours strength training. So the more muscle groups you're involving throughout the movements, the less time you're going to spend trying to work every single muscle group. But that's still a pretty common misconception, is I have to hit every little muscle group instead of doing the big movements, squats. And I'm not talking about barbell squats specifically, but different kinds of squats, different kinds of presses, different types of pulls, things like that, where you're using multiple muscle groups instead of just one at a time. So that's going to be one of the things that I really program with my runners. Second thing I want to talk about is the principle of specificity for running. So some studies just came out like recently. I like to keep up with the new studies, and it was talking about how actually maximum effort training benefits has during this study they saw that it benefited runners and endurance athletes more than say training in a higher rep range, which for a long time is what we would train runners in, is like 10 reps plus 12, 15, 20. So it's some new studies have come out and also shown the benefits of maximum effort training, meaning like not as high, not as in the higher rep ranges, for lack of a better term. But when it comes to running, you do want to train things that are specific to the movement that y'all are doing. So if you're ever been taught, or if you've ever learned about running technique, it's kind of a technique. I don't know, a lot of people don't know, right? You kind of should learn how to run efficiently, but having the upright posture and things like that, and doing some more specific movements specific to running and to the running movement. Like I said, I can get into some specific exercises, but I don't have too much time. Third, I wanted to talk about is unilateral work and the importance of working your body and working one side at a time. Especially with runners, what I see a lot of things that cause injury to begin with are imbalances. So one side is stronger than the other, one side is compensating for the other, especially when you're doing such a repetitive motion using both legs. And we do things like carry your purse on one side, carry your kid on one side, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole list of reasons why we have these imbalances, but the best thing to do to correct those when it comes to cross training is doing unilateral exercises. So one leg at a time, one side at a time, things like that. Lunges, one leg squats, one leg deadlifts. So, and you should incorporate bilateral training as well, but unilateral training is gonna help with that, the imbalances. And the name of the game when it comes to runners is like injury prevention. Most of my runners don't really need to be like strong and squat 1,000 pounds, but they just need to be able to run and like stop getting hurt, So that's where the unilateral movements come into play. Now that goes in to say the next thing is moving in the different planes of motion. So when you're running, you're in what's called the sagittal plane. So everything is here. You're never really running laterally, or using like the rotational plane. So working in those different planes of motion and changing it up, if you will, is going to help with that as well. Because if you're stuck doing this, you're probably not going to be strong when it comes to side movements, rotational movements. And so implementing things like that that don't just keep you in one dimension. They call it like 3D training or functional training. Is going to have a pretty big benefit to endurance athletes. The last thing I want to talk about, and which I was really happy to see that y'all are doing some core work after, is core. You know, and one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand is like that you should be doing a lot of like crunches and actual like flexion, like spinal flexion and things like that, and that's fine, but really you want to train your core to stabilize, right? Because that's what it's doing when you're running, is you're holding your core in a stable position. You're not actually crunching, so you don't want to like strengthen a certain motion if it's not, you know, that's not really what the core is meant to do. It's meant to stabilize the midsection between the ribs and the pelvis. So like just basic, everybody knows what planks are. That's called the isometric, right? You're like holding in position if you're, you know, if you're doing it right. And exercises that stabilize the core is what's going to see the most benefit for runners and strengthen your core overall. So like I said, that's really the role of the core muscles, and that's how it's used when y'all are running. If you are familiar with any type of like pose running, which is, you can incorporate even without the minimal running shoes and things like that, the principles, but you're kind of like at a slight torso lean, and so your core should be turned on when you're running slightly. You know, it shouldn't be like 100% contraction, but you should be using it so that way you can stay at a slight angle if you're practicing those principles of the running technique.